The Widow, Episode 12. The night was dark as the secret Isabel carried in her heart. A year after the death of her beloved Ricardo, she finally allowed a new smile, a new warmth, to approach. But this warmth came from Rafael, Ricardo's brother, who had always loved her in secret. The ardent passion between Isabel and Rafael was a danger, a forbidden flame that threatened to burn everything in its path. A mysterious encounter, an anonymous note, a lurking shadow. Someone was watching their furtive meetings, and this person wasn't willing to let Isabel be happy. What will happen? Will love blossom even amidst so much danger? The night was so dark that it seemed even the stars were hiding, afraid of the secret Isabel kept in her heart. It had been a year since Ricardo, the love of her life, had passed away, leaving an immense void in her soul. A void she tried to fill with work, with memories, with pain. But a year is also a long time for a broken heart. And then, almost without realizing it, a new warmth began to melt the ice that enveloped her heart. It was Rafael, Ricardo's brother, the man who had always loved Isabel in silence, watching her from afar, with a passion as deep as the sea. Rafael was everything Ricardo was and wasn't. Ricardo, impulsive and explosive, had a contagious laugh that Isabel loved so much. Rafael, calmer, more observant, possessed a tenderness that touched Isabel's soul at a depth she never imagined. Their meetings were stolen, furtive, as if they were secret encounters between two forbidden lovers. They were stolen kisses under the moonlight, whispered words to the wind, and a look that spoke more than 1,000 words could say. But this ardent passion, this love that blossomed in the shadows, was a danger. It was a forbidden flame that threatened to consume everything in its path, to burn everything Isabel had built around her pain. After all, Rafael was the brother of the man she loved, the man she had lost. Their love was a sin, a betrayal of Ricardo's memory, an unimaginable pain for the family. In that mysterious encounter, under the faint moonlight, a note fell at Isabel's feet, a thin piece of paper, almost invisible, like a dry leaf carried by the wind. The words were written illegibly, a strange handwriting that seemed to want to hide the true meaning. Was it a veiled threat? A warning? Isabel didn't know, but her heart pounded like a bird trapped in a cage. It was as if a cold shadow had insinuated itself between her and Rafael, as if someone were watching them, watching every move, every gesture, every passionate whisper. And this person, whoever it was, didn't seem willing to let Isabel and Rafael be happy. Was it someone from the family? Someone who couldn't accept Isabel's new love? Someone who still harbored resentment against Ricardo? Or was it someone who had other plans, other dark secrets related to Ricardo's past, that were somehow connected to Isabel? The possibilities were endless, and each one was more frightening than the last. Isabel could feel the presence of this shadow, as if an invisible web were trapping them, suffocating them, with each encounter. With each touch, each shared smile, each word of love exchanged between them, the shadow became more real, more threatening. Fear became a constant companion, a chill that invaded her body, freezing the passion that was born in her heart. The atmosphere between them was charged, dense with secrets and mysteries. Isabel's gaze expressed her anguish and fear. She loved Rafael, and she loved him deeply, but the memory of Ricardo still hurt, and the danger looming over her new love frightened her. Their love seemed to be an act of defiance, a daring against fate. As Rafael wrapped her in his arms, protecting her from the cold of the night and, perhaps, from the dangers that lurked around them, Isabel wondered if it would be possible to find happiness amidst so much darkness. If this love, so intense, so forbidden, could survive the shadow of Ricardo's death and the threat that hung over them. With each passing day, the certainty of the threat increased, and fear turned into an immense weight on her shoulders. And Isabel knew that something very serious was about to happen, something that could change their lives forever. After all, how could such a delicate and new love resist the power of such a dark secret? What would be the next step in this dangerous dance between love and death? The night breeze carried the scent of jasmine, but for Isabel, the aroma was stifled by fear. The shadow that pursued her was not just a sensation. She could feel it, cold and oppressive, like an icy hand on her shoulder. Rafael, with his eyes full of passion and concern, squeezed her hand tightly, his fingers intertwined with hers as if they were a link against the imminent danger. He perceived her fear, the fragility that invaded her, and tried to comfort her with silent caresses, whispers of love that were like a balm for her wounded soul. But the note, that sinister and enigmatic message, continued to burn in her mind. The words were like barbs, embedded in her conscience, tormenting her relentlessly. She showed it to Raphael, the crooked and menacing letters, and together they tried to decipher the enigma, looking for clues in each stroke, in each curve of the writing. Was it a warning from someone who was watching them? Someone who wanted to separate them? The idea that someone might be plotting something against them, against their newborn love, was unbearable. Raphael, determined to protect Isabel, decided to investigate. He knew that Ricardo's death had not been a mere accident, as everyone said. There was something obscure, something he sensed, something that could be connected to this threat. He began to search in his files, in Ricardo's memories, in every detail that could help them decipher the mystery of the anonymous note. With each document found, with each conversation with Ricardo's friends and relatives, a new piece of the puzzle was revealed, increasing the apprehension of both. While Raphael sought answers in Ricardo's past, Isabel tried to cope with the whirlwind of emotions that overwhelmed her. The love for Raphael was intense, overwhelming, but the guilt for Ricardo's loss still haunted her. The memory of Ricardo, so vivid in her mind, created an incessant conflict in her heart, a conflict between the past and the future, between pain and hope. She loved Raphael, but she still loved Ricardo, and the superposition of these two loves created immense pain in her chest. Raphael's investigation led him to a dark place in the family's past. A secret buried for years involving a dispute over land, money, power. A secret that Ricardo was about to reveal before his death. With each discovery, Raphael felt closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. He realized that the threat was not just a warning, but a promise of something much worse. Someone wanted to silence them, to prevent them from continuing the investigation. Isabel, following the investigation, began to notice that people around her were acting strangely, watching her with furtive glances, whispering words in dark corners. She realized that she was not alone in her struggle, but surrounded by enemies disguised as friends. The atmosphere became charged, full of suspicions, with each smile potentially hiding a sharp knife, each friendly word potentially concealing a deep betrayal. The trust, once present in her relationships, was replaced by disconcerting distrust. Raphael, getting closer to the truth, discovered that the anonymous note was connected to a criminal organization that Ricardo had investigated before his death. The organization was powerful, influential, and did not hesitate to use violence to protect its secrets. The discovery was a shock for Isabel, who never imagined that the husband she loved so much was involved in something so dangerous. The truth about Ricardo's death was closer than she ever imagined, and this truth was more cruel and threatening than any nightmare. With each step, the danger increased, and the possibility of Isabel and Raphael losing their lives became increasingly real, more palpable, more terrifying. What would they do now, faced with such a great threat? How could such a recent love resist the force of such a powerful enemy? The dark night promised a confrontation, a fight for survival, between love and death. The night was dark as the secret that enveloped Isabel and Raphael. The anonymous note, with its menacing handwriting, still burned in her mind. It was a warning, yes, but of what? Fear, once a shadow, was now a monster that was slowly swallowing them. Raphael, determined to protect Isabel, had uncovered part of the truth. Ricardo did not die in an accident. He was investigating a powerful criminal organization, a web of lies and corruption that reached the highest echelons of society. Ricardo's death was not an accident, it was a silent murder, covered by the shadows of the night and the influence of the organization. The discovery was a shock for Isabel. The man she loved, the man who had built a world of dreams and happiness for her, was involved in an underworld of violence and secrets. The pain of loss mingled with anger, betrayal, confusion. How could she have loved a man so involved in something so dark? Doubt gnawed at her inside. But at the same time, the discovery united Isabel and Raphael even more. The common danger transformed them into warriors ready to face anything together. The organization, realizing that its secrets were being revealed, decided to act. A group of hooded men invaded the house where Isabel and Raphael were. Isabel, trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, felt her heart in her throat. Fear, anguish, anger. Everything mixed in an explosion of feelings. Raphael, brave and determined, protected her like a lion protecting its cub. He faced the men alone, dodging blows, using the intelligence and cleverness that characterized him. The fight was fierce, a mortal confrontation between light and shadows. Isabel watched everything paralyzed, trapped by terror and helplessness. The scene was so violent, so real, that it seemed like a nightmare from which she would never wake up. With each blow, each scream, each punch, the hope of survival diminished. She felt trapped in a trap with no way out, just watching the love of her life fighting against implacable men. Raphael fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, protecting Isabel with his own body, deflecting the blows that were aimed at her. The house became a battlefield, with broken furniture, shattered glass, and the silence of the night torn by screams of pain and anger. The air was dense, heavy, charged with adrenaline and fear. Isabel, desperate, looked for a way to help him, but all she could do was watch, helpless, the brutal scene unfolding before her eyes. At a crucial moment, when Raphael was already injured and exhausted, a shot hit his arm, eliciting a cry of pain. Isabel screamed Raphael's name, her heart broken by the scene of violence. But Raphael, despite the intense pain, did not fall. He managed to dodge the second shot with extraordinary reflexes and inexhaustible willpower. The fight seemed endless, a macabre dance between life and death, love and hate. Raphael, despite being injured, managed to defend himself, protecting Isabel with supernatural strength. However, the number of enemies was greater, and the possibility of Raphael's survival decreased with each passing moment. Adrenaline left his muscles aching and trembling. The pain was intense, but the will to protect her was greater. Suddenly, like an avenging angel, the police arrived, attracted by the shots and the shouting. The hooded men fled, disappearing into the shadows of the night. The police surrounded the house and arrested some of the men, but others managed to escape. The battle was over, but the war was far from over. Raphael, injured and exhausted, hugged Isabel tightly, as if his very life depended on that hug. Their love, forged in the fire of danger, had survived once again. But what would the future hold for them? What new dangers awaited them? The answer was still shrouded in shadows. The truth about Ricardo's death, the criminal organization, and the fight for justice was only just beginning, and danger still loomed over Isabel and Raphael. The episode ends with a single, concise phrase: the fight continues. The night was so dark that it seemed to swallow even the moon, leaving Isabel and Raphael enveloped in a fog of fear and passion. The anonymous note, with its threatening writing, was a harbinger of the danger that was approaching. It had only been a year since Ricardo, Isabel's great love, had passed away, leaving a void in her heart that she tried to fill with the strength of work and memories. But the warmth of love for Raphael, Ricardo's brother, had begun to melt the glacier that imprisoned her heart. It was a forbidden love, secret, a flame that could set everything in its path ablaze. While they loved each other in secret, under the moonlight, a shadow watched them, patient and implacable. Raphael, so different from Ricardo, but equally passionate, brought a silent comfort to Isabel, a consolation that soothed her wounded soul. Their meetings were furtive, full of stolen kisses and whispers of love that echoed in the darkness. But their happiness was ephemeral, threatened by a malignant presence that seemed to infiltrate their encounters. The cold shadow of the threat grew each day, like a poisonous plant that fed on their moments of joy. The note was the last straw, a dark warning, a veiled threat that cut the air like a knife. It was a dangerous game, a deadly dance between love and death. The unknown handwriting, the implicit threat in the almost invisible words. Isabel felt the weight of uncertainty, fear tearing at her heart. Raphael, noticing his beloved's anguish, hugged her tightly, his arms protecting her from the darkness of the night and the danger that hung in the air. The investigation began. Raphael, driven by love and intuition, delved into Ricardo's past, searching for clues that could unravel the mystery. Each document, each conversation revealed a piece of the truth. Ricardo did not die in an accident. He had been murdered. And the murder was linked to a criminal organization, a web of secrets and lies that involved power, money, and violence. Ricardo's death was far from a simple accident. Isabel's fear grew. She realized that people around her, supposed friends and family, watched her with suspicion, their smiles hiding dark secrets. The atmosphere became heavy, charged with suspicion. Happiness, once so close, now seemed to be just an illusion. Trust, once present, had been replaced by distrust and fear. Innocence had been brutally stolen. Raphael, getting closer to the truth, discovered that the anonymous note was a warning, a promise of something much worse. He was digging deeper than he imagined, confronting the dark shadows of the past and the overwhelming power of a ruthless criminal organization. With each step, the danger intensified, putting his life and Isabel's life at risk. The fight for justice was only just beginning, and they were not prepared for what was to come. The night culminated in a brutal attack. Hooded men invaded the house, their weapons loaded with hatred and bloodlust. Raphael, brave and determined, fought with the ferocity of a lion protecting its cub. Isabel, terrified, watched the desperate fight, helpless in the face of violence. The confrontation was intense, fierce, a deadly dance between life and death. Raphael, injured and exhausted, managed to protect Isabel with his own body, dodging blows, receiving injuries, a true hero of flesh and blood. But the fight seemed endless. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins, the pain was immense, but the strength to protect Isabel surpassed any suffering. The fight was a matter of life or death. When all seemed lost, a deafening sound cut through the night, the sirens of the police. The hooded men fled, leaving behind a trail of destruction and chaos. The police arrived in time to apprehend some of them, but others disappeared into the shadows. The battle ended, but the war was only just beginning. Raphael, seriously injured, hugged Isabel tightly, their bodies trembling, relief mixing with pain. The fight against the shadows had gained a new chapter. The victory, however, was bittersweet. While Raphael was taken to the hospital, Isabel received a new message, a new note, even more menacing than the first. This time, the message contained a photograph, a picture of her, sleeping serenely, taken from the window of her own room. The caption? "Your turn now, Isabel." The cell phone screen goes dark, leaving Isabel trapped in a freezing void. As the camera closes in on her expression, petrified by terror,